It's time for my March wrap-up. Hey everyone, it's Rhonda and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of March, and it was a lot. This month was a doozy. I read 19 books. I'm very proud of myself, but I did read some great books. I have quite a few 4- and 5-star books, but I also have some books I did not like. I have quite a few 2-star books. So let's go ahead and start there. I'm going to start with my 2-star books and then work my way up. Fortunately, I do not have any 1-star books. I did DNF a few books, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go over them. I will say what they were. Better Left Unsent, First Base, and It Factor. All three of those are romances, and all three of those books, they weren't for me, so I set them aside. But I do not have any 1-star books. Let's start with the 2 stars. First up is a book I do not have a physical copy of. It's called The Clinic by Kate Quinn. This is a thriller, and it's a long thriller. This book was 448 pages. It was released, I believe, in January of this year. So in this book, you're following a woman by the name of Megan maybe, or Maggie, I don't know. It's either Megan or Maggie, but her sister is famous, I believe she's a country singer who has substance abuse problems, and she checked herself into this very exclusive celebrity rehab center. Well, her sister dies while she's there, supposedly of an overdose, but Meg, we'll call her Meg, she does not think that's what happened. She thinks she was murdered. So she ends up checking into the same rehab to find out what happened to her sister. So that's the whole story of the book. With this book being 448 pages, I just felt it was way too long. I felt like it could have been shaved down by 150 pages, and it might have been a 3-star read for me. There were certain things in the story that I was interested in, and it did go by quickly in certain parts. But for the majority of the book, it just dragged on. The second thing I didn't like about it is the plot twist. I thought it was way over the top. Now, I know this is fiction and most plot twists are going to be over the top, but this took it to a whole nother level. It was crazy what happened, and not in a good way. So for those 2 reasons, I gave it 2 stars. The next 2-star book is Just My Type by Fallon Ballard. And this is a rom-com, and it is a second chance romance and a little bit of an enemy to lover trope, but I didn't enjoy it. I felt like it was boring, and I ended up skimming through parts of it. So this book is about a woman named Lana who works for an online magazine blog, and one day her longtime boyfriend breaks up with her. She thinks he's going to propose, but instead he dumps her, and so she's devastated. And Lana's the type of girl who she needs to have someone in her life. She's very much into monogamy. She has to have that guy in her life. So one day, someone from her past walks into the magazine during a meeting, and he is being hired to work there. Come to find out, it is her ex-boyfriend from high school, and he is a international journalist, and he's come back for some reason to work at this magazine. And come to find out, I think a promotion is happening, and they have to compete for that promotion. So they're competing on Instagram, who can get the most likes, and whoever does get the most likes gets this promotion. I thought the plot was stupid. I didn't like it. I just kind of found it boring. In certain parts, I was skimming through it, and I just really didn't like the plot of whoever gets the most likes on Instagram gets this job. I thought that was kind of goofy, but not in a good way. There's also a lot of Marvel references. I'm not a Marvel girl, not a DC Comics. I don't like superheroes. But if you like Marvel, there's so many Marvel references, and I think the author means it to be funny, but I didn't get the jokes because I'm not a Marvel fan. Also too, I really didn't care about the characters. I didn't feel the history with Lana or Seth. I didn't feel their connection or their chemistry. I wasn't into the characters at all. And for me, I just wanted more angst and more chemistry with the characters. I wanted their love story developed a little bit more. But for me, this was a miss. I would not recommend it. The next 2-star read for me is The Plot by Jean Corlitz. I hope that's how you pronounce it. So this book is about a man named Jake who was once a promising new author. He wrote one book that got a lot of acclaim, But since then, he's just been struggling to put out that next great big novel. And because of that, he is working at a third-rate MFA program. And one day, this guy named Evan, one of his students, comes in, and he's kind of a jerk. He's really arrogant and unlikable. But he tells Jake, his teacher, during their teacher-student conference that, hey, I have this great idea, and he tells them about it. And Jake's like, oh my gosh, this is a great novel. So cut to the future, and he finds out that Evan has died. But he has never published his book. He's never submitted his book. As far as he knows, he's never even finished the book. So Jake ends up stealing that great novel idea and writing his own story. So after he writes this book, it ends up being a hit. It ends up being an instant bestseller. He's this huge deal now, right? Well, eventually he starts getting emails from someone saying, I know you didn't write this story. You stole this from Evan. And they start tormenting him with these emails. So this whole book is about Jake trying to figure out who this person is. Are they going to expose him to the world as a phony and as a plagiarist? It was a great idea. It was a great idea. I love the idea. I just didn't enjoy the read. I thought it was boring as hell. I felt like this really wasn't a thriller or a mystery or suspenseful. This was more of a just literary fiction with maybe a side plot of some suspense. I also kind of figured this out pretty soon, what was happening, who was behind the emails. So for me, this is a miss. I do know this author is coming out with a sequel, so if you have read this and you enjoyed it, she does have another book coming out that's a companion to this. Don't get mad at me. But the next 2-star read is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Oh, I'm sorry, I did not like this. Oh, I hate that I did not like this. I wanted to love this so much. So this book is about a woman named January whose dad has just died, and he has left her with this beach house. So she goes to the beach house just to clean it out and to put it on the market. And she is also an author. I believe she writes romance novels, and she is struggling to write her next book. Well, next door is a guy by the name of Augustus, and January and Augustus have this history. They used to go to college together. They were very competitive with their writings. He is a writer too. He is an author too. But where January writes happy endings and romance, he writes the complete opposite books. Well, they end up meeting up again, and he thinks her writing is probably easy to do. She could never write a book like his. And she's like, okay, I accept the challenge. So they end up swapping genres, and she agrees to write the next great American novel, and he agrees to write a book with a happy ending. But in order to do that, they have to go on these dates to kind of get their minds in the right place so that they can write these books. I went into this book with high expectations just because of all the talk about how good it was. And I just felt really let down. Also, I felt like this was more, kind of like the plot was more like a literary novel with a side plot of romance. I just really didn't feel the chemistry between January and Augustus. Augustus. I keep wanting to call him August. But I just felt like there really wasn't that much chemistry. And Emily Henry was just, I feel like she's trying to push this angst and this history and this love story that they just never got to have. And I just didn't feel that. She did go back in time and kind of talk a little bit of them in college. But again, I just didn't feel that connection between the two. I didn't feel that chemistry. I don't know. For me, I just felt like this was a little on the dull side, and I was expecting more. So unfortunately, I had to give it 2 stars. Okay, with those 2 stars out of the way, let's get to the books that I did enjoy. The first 3-star book is This Spells Love by Kate Robb, and this was cute. This is a magical realism book. It has about 321 pages, and it is a little bit of a time warp where the character kind of changes her current situation magically. And this is also a friends to lovers trope. This book is about a girl named Gemma, and I love that name because that is my youngest daughter's name. But it's about Gemma, who has recently been dumped by her boyfriend. I believe they were together for a couple of years. And she's obviously devastated and wishes that she never met him. Well, her aunt works at she owns a bookstore, and the spell book has come in, and her aunt says, hey, let's do the spell on your ex, and we'll do a spell where you would never met him. And she's like, haha, okay. So I can't remember if it's her sister or her aunt, they get together and they do this spell, but she needs to seal it with a kiss. And she has this best friend who is a guy, his name's Dax, and he shows up and they're like, okay, you might need to kiss him to make the spell work. So she gets drunk and does that, and she wakes up the next morning and that spell has worked. She is in a reality where she's never met her boyfriend, but at the same time, she's never met her best friend Dax. And so this is about her just reconnecting with Dax and trying to get that friendship back on track. Also in this alternate reality, her life is a little bit different. I thought it was really cute and whimsical. It had an interesting plot. For this one, I felt like it dragged on a little bit. And again, the chemistry, I just wasn't feeling the chemistry between Gemma and Dax. Also too, I felt like Gemma's inner turmoil was a little too much. Like she was constantly saying, I miss Dax. Why isn't Dax my friend? What's going on? It was just too much. Her inner turmoil, it was too much for me. So it was cute. It was good, but there were just a few things I did not like about it. But overall, it was good, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read that I do not have a physical copy of is One by One. I did this one by ebook, and it is by Frida McFadden. So what I'm gathering with Frida McFadden books, now that I'm reading some of her backlist, is she writes good books, but they're more like filler books. They're super easy to read, they're quick reads, they're entertaining, there's not a lot of depth to them, but they're good. And One by One is an example of that. So in this book, you are following a woman who is not really happy in her marriage anymore, which is a common theme with Frida McFadden books. She's not happy in her marriage, and her husband are going on this trip with some of their friends. So on the way to this cabin that they're staying at, the van that they are traveling in just goes dead on them, and they're having to hike to this cabin. It's supposed to be like a 2-mile or 3-mile walk. Well, along the way, things start happening, and each person starts dropping off one by one. So the rest of your book, you're trying to figure out what's happening, who's killing these people, what's going on. So this book was okay. It was good. It was entertaining. It was a quick read. I think I read this in a day. It was super fast to read. So what I didn't like about it is the plot just really wasn't that unique of a story. I've read other books very similar to this. There was a plot twist I didn't guess, but it wasn't too bananas. It wasn't like Frida McFadden's usual plot twist where I'm just like, oh, what? It was just like, okay, you know, which is not normal for Frida McFadden. When I read a McFadden novel, I'm expecting to be surprised and shocked with the final twist, and I just didn't get that here. But overall, this was an okay read. It was fine. I would recommend it if you are a Frida McFadden fan. You would probably like this. It is a very quick read, and for that, I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read is The Other Misses by Mary Kubica. I give this 3 stars. It was good. I sometimes have trouble with Mary Kubica books. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good, and this one was fine. So in this book, you're following Sadie and Will, who moved to this new house, to this new town, and the woman who lives next door has been murdered. So in this book, we're trying to figure out what happened to the neighbor, and weird things are happening. The reason why I gave this 3 stars is I had this book figured out. Maybe I'm getting just too disillusioned with all the thrillers I read, or desensitized, but I had this figured out within, I think, the first 25% of the book. As I was reading through the first 25%, I like, okay, this is what's going to happen, and I will be shocked if something else is going to be the plot twist. And sure enough, I think the big plot twist was what I thought it was. There was another plot twist I wasn't expecting, but this was a fine read. It was entertaining. It is a psychological thriller. It did everything I like in a thriller. It made me turn the pages quick. I also listened to this on audiobook, and I do recommend the audiobook. It was great. It was a good, quick read. It kept me entertained. I just gave it 3 stars just because of how predictable it was. But if you are a Mary Kubica fan, go check this out. It's a solid read. The next 3-star book is The Next Couple in 5B by Lisa Unger. And first, right off the bat, would you look at this cover? It is so eerie with the apartment building and the dark background with the hot pink letters. It really gives off those eerie vibes, and I love the cover on this. So this book is a new release. It came out in March, and I was really excited to read it. So this book features kind of a dual timeline. There is a little bit of paranormal activity, there's secrets, and it has everything that would make a good thriller, in my opinion, everything that I look for in a thriller. I just feel like it just missed the mark, but it was still a good read. So this book is about Rosie and Chad, who inherit an apartment building in this historic building in New York City called the Windermere. And they think that they've hit the jackpot with this apartment because it's worth millions of dollars, but they soon find out that there's some deep, dark secrets going on here at the apartment building. So this does have a dual timeline, and you're jumping back and forth between Rosie and Chad's experience in this building, as well as another couple that has lived in the same apartment named Willa and Paul. So with that dual timeline, you're kind of finding out kind of the backstory with this building and the apartment. So this book felt kind of underdeveloped. It touched on a few things, and some of those things it did do well, but I felt like the characters just really weren't developed as well as they could have been. I didn't really like the female character. I didn't care about Chad. I really didn't care about Willa and Paul either. I was just like, hearing everything that happened to him, I was like, okay. I wasn't invested into it. And I don't know, I just felt like I was wanting more. By the end, I was just underwhelmed. So for that, I gave it 3 stars. It's still a good read. If you like Lisa Unger, you might like this. I just feel like she's written other books that have been better developed and are a better read. Now we're gonna move on to my 4-star books, and I have some great picks to share with you guys. I'm gonna start with my book of the month book called Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I really enjoyed this. This was such a fun read. I believe Amy Tintera is a young adult author too, and this is her first adult thriller book, and I think she did a great job for her first time writing an adult book. This book is about a woman by the name of Lucy Chase, and she is from a small Texas town, and while she was there, she was accused of murdering her best friend. But they could never prove that she killed her friend, so to escape all that, she moved to California. And you're jumping a few years later, and her grandmother calls and says, hey, I'm celebrating my 80th birthday. I'm having this party. I would love for you to come back home and celebrate with us. At the same time, there is a podcast called Listen for the Lie, and the person who hosts that podcast named Ben, he's going to be in town too, covering what happened to Lucy's friend and Lucy's involvement in her death. Well, she ends up coming back home, and she decides to go ahead and face some of those demons from her past. I really love this book. If you like dark comedy and dark humor, this is it. Also too, I felt like this was a movie in my head. I could see this being turned into a movie just because of some of the comedic elements. So in addition to that dark comedy, I loved a lot of things about this book. I really enjoyed the character development. I enjoyed Lucy's just sarcastic, snarky personality. I ate it up. I was laughing so hard at some of her actions and some of the things she was saying. Her grandmother is a firecracker. I hope when I'm her age, I can act like her, because she is just a hoot. What kept this from being a 5 stars, I didn't love some of the interactions with Lucy and her ex-husband while she's there in Texas. So also too, on the night that her friend died, Lucy has selective amnesia. She doesn't remember anything that happened past a certain point of that night. And because of that, I just don't love the amnesia trope, to be honest. I feel like there's another way that you can write a book without constantly saying, oh, I don't remember what happened, my brain's blocked that out. I feel like it's a cop-out in some ways with authors, and I would like to read something else that doesn't involve amnesia when it comes to thrillers. So overall, this is a definite 4-star read. If you love books that feature podcasts, then this is definitely for you. If you like a dark comedy, this is for you. With the podcast, it is sprinkled in, I believe it's alternating chapters. And with the podcast, they're interviewing people from the town so you can learn more about Lucy and her friend and kind of what happened from their eyes. So for that, I give it 4 stars. It was a good, solid read, and I'm looking forward to reading more from Amy Tintera. Next up is another book by Mary Kubica called She's Not Sorry. And this is another new release. It was released on April 2nd, and I gave this a solid 4 stars. And if you're looking for a fast-paced, tense thriller with crazy twists, then this book is for you. I really enjoyed it. So here you are following a single mom who is recently divorced, and one day a patient is brought into her ICU triage who has survived a suicide attempt. This patient has jumped off a bridge onto some railroad tracks and is now in a coma. So while she is helping her patient who is in a coma, she's also trying to help the parents deal with what's happening to their daughter. She's also dealing with an ex-husband. She's dealing with a daughter who is just being a teenager. And at the same time that all this is going on, there is the whole area where she lives is kind of living in fear because there's a man terrorizing women who are home alone. He's following them home and killing them. So that is a lot for any one person to deal with. And I was really there for it. It was very fast paced, as I said, and very bingey. I did find that several chapters were a little slow, especially in the beginning. It took a little bit for me to get into it, but once I got to a certain part of the book, it flew by. I could not turn the pages fast enough. It was gripping. There is one part that involved a daughter where I was just like, what's happening? I was very stressed out. It did not let up, and once I got past that slow part, I was able to finish this book in a few hours. This book just did not let up with the twists and turns and the drama that unfolded. It was really good. It's not a 5-star just because it took a bit. I thoroughly enjoyed this book and I highly recommend it. So definitely go read She's Not Sorry by Mary Keep a Guy. The next book I read is Survive the Night by Riley Sager, and this is the only book of Riley Sager's that I had not read yet. I was putting it off just because I heard so many people just really not like this book, and I figured I wouldn't like it too. But I'm so glad that I finally decided to read it because I actually enjoyed it. This book is about a girl named Charlie who is a college student, and after the murder of her best friend and roommate, she decides to quit college and go back home during the Thanksgiving break. And in order to get home, she hitches a ride, and while she's in the car with this person, she's thinking he is actually the serial killer who has killed her friend and roommate as well as other women in the area. And so the whole time she's trying to figure out how does she get out of the situation. So this book is set in the 90s, and you are dealing with an unreliable narrator. And this is just a true Riley Sager book to me. I enjoyed it. It was a good thriller. It was very atmospheric. It put me there in the car with these two characters, and I was tense and trying to figure out, you need to get out. You need to get out of this car. Why aren't you getting out? I did not like that Charlie she was the girl, she would be the girl in a scary movie who would run up the stairs instead of out the door. She kept putting herself in these situations where trouble was going to come, or if she had a way out, she didn't take it. And that was very frustrating as a reader because I was like, what are you doing? But overall, I did love this. I did figure out a couple of plot twists, but there were some other twists in there I did not know, and I enjoyed it. So overall, this book is not my favorite Riley Sager book, but it was not his worst book either. But it was still entertaining, and I still enjoyed it, and it was still a page turner for me. But like I said, it was a good read. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I would read it again. The next 4-star read for me is The One by John Mars, and this is a book that a lot of people have put on their best ever thriller book recs. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was a solid 4-star read. So this book is about 5 different characters who take this DNA test to find their soulmate. This book had a very interesting plot, and you're following 5 different people once they take the test up until the end, and kind of how this test affected their lives. And it was very interesting. One of the people, and I'm not giving anything away, I'm not giving away any spoilers, but one of the people is a serial killer, and I found his POV extremely interesting. I was on the edge of my seat with him. And also too, the chapters are super short, so you can fly through it pretty quickly. Some of the cons I had is I just wished for a little more thrills. This read more like a sci-fi novel just because it is a sci-fi novel. But I thought because it's on so many thriller best of recommendation lists, I thought this would be a little more suspenseful, a little more thrilling. And the last con is I really didn't like the plot twist at the end. I kind of saw it coming, but then the repercussion, it wasn't for me. But outside of that, this was a solid 4 stars. I highly recommend it. I do want to read more of John Mars. If you've read anything else by him, please let me know if you've read anything that I should check out. I'm laughing because I love this book so much. Next up is Riley Thorne and the Dead Guy Next Door. And boy, was this a fun and entertaining book. I laughed throughout this book. I loved all the quirky characters. And this is part of a series, and I'm so looking forward to the other books in this series. I'm going to read them all. I just really enjoyed this so much. But this book is about a reluctant clairvoyant named Riley Thorne, and she is recently divorced, and she has been taken to the cleaners by her ex-husband who was cheating on her, which stinks. But she's now living in this old mansion that's been converted into apartment buildings, and I believe some of the people who live there are family members, but they're all senior citizens, and every one of those characters is so unique and quirky, and I loved it. They were so funny. But one of her neighbors is her porn-watching uncle, who she is having visions of him being murdered, and she's trying to give him information that something bad's about to happen to him without being the kooky clairvoyant, right? But eventually that uncle is murdered, and Riley and a private investigator by the name of Nick start investigating the murder of that uncle. And the chemistry between Riley and Thorne is off the charts. I love that chemistry. They had very funny and witty banter, and I just love them. I can't wait to read more about their relationship in the next books. I thought they were just so cute together. And really all of the characters in this book, as I mentioned earlier, are so quirky and funny and eccentric. I just felt like this was such a wonderfully written book and a very witty book, and I just couldn't stop laughing. So the only thing that kept this from being a 5-star read were the action scenes. It kind of felt like it was trying to be an action movie, but not in a good way. I just felt like it dragged on in certain parts in regards to those action scenes. But outside of that, I loved it, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. So this next book I read is my very first Abby Jimenez book called Part of Your World, and I love this. This was so good. So this book is about Alexis, who, while she's passing through this small town, drives into a ditch in order to avoid a raccoon, and the town mayor slash B&B owner pulls her out of the ditch and saves her. They end up meeting up again at a bar there in the town and end up hooking up for the night. Well, Daniel and Alexis are complete polar opposites. She's a city girl. He is a small town guy. He's also 10 years younger. She comes from a very well-to-do doctor family. She herself is a doctor at this hospital, and their worlds are very different. So really with this book, you're just following the two characters as they're trying to figure out how they can be with each other and in which capacity. So I was hooked with this book from the very beginning. I love the beginning scene with the Spanx. I laughed so hard with that. But really with this book, I felt like it covered difficult topics very well. It's dealing with emotional and physical abuse, and I feel like Abby Jimenez covered that as best as she could in this book. This was a very funny and fun rom-com that had some emotional moments. I didn't full on cry, but I did tear up in certain parts. I love the people of the town. I love how everyone just kind of steps in and helps each other out. That's what community is, and I really felt that. I just felt like this was a really great book, and because of that, I ended up reading Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I immediately read this right after this one. I also loved this one. So this book was also a 4-star read for me. So this book is actually Bree's book. She is the friend of Alexis from Part of Your World, and I really loved Bree in that book. I thought she was funny and just a good friend to Alexis, and so I was excited to see that this book was her story. But she's up for the same promotion that Alexis was up for in the previous book, and she doesn't think she's going to get it because this new doctor comes in and it seems like he's going to get that promotion. The new doctor's name is Jacob, and he suffers from social anxiety, and through letters he communicates with Bree and tells her, look, I don't want this promotion. I'm not trying to take this job from you. And through these letters, they have a little bit of a connection. Also going on in this novel, Bree is going through a divorce, and her life is just turned upside down because of it. Her brother is very, very sick. He needs a kidney transplant, so she's dealing with that. So this book, with the social anxiety that Jacob's dealing with and everything that's going on with her, this is an emotional read. But I thought, again, it was well done. I really loved these two characters. I think Bree and Jacob are just so cute together. I really love them. I thought their story was so sweet. I do have a little bit of social anxiety. My husband does, so I'm very familiar with that. And I felt like she covered that very, very well. So definitely go read Abby Jimenez, yours truly. You're going to love it. Both of these books are excellent. Abby does have a new book coming out here in April. It is the book of the month pick, so I'm excited about that one. Can't wait to read my next Abby Jimenez book. My last 4-star read is Murder Road by Simone St. James, and this is also another new release for the month of March. And I love Simone St. James's book so much. So I was super excited to read this new release. The author is known for atmospheric writing. She writes beautifully. All of her books also feature some sort of paranormal aspect, paranormal theme. And this one did not disappoint. I thought it was well done. So this is about a newly married couple who are on their way to their honeymoon. And while they are driving at night, of course, they pick up a hitchhiker. So once they pick up the hitchhiker, they find out that she's been stabbed and they take her to the hospital. And while she's at the hospital, she dies. And this couple is immediately under suspicion for the death of this young woman, even though they brought her to the hospital to get her help. Why would someone who killed her do that? Anyway, that was a little bit of a gripe for me in the beginning of this book. So they can't leave the town immediately because the police have their car and they are processing it for evidence. And while they're there, they find out that hitchhikers have been known to be murdered along this stretch of the road that they were traveling on for years. So the couple begins investigating these murders and what happened to this girl. I felt this was a great fast-paced thriller. I love that there are true ghostly elements to this book, as is the case with other Simone St. James books. But this one does read a little bit more like a straightforward, mainstream, non-Simone St. James thriller. And if you've read any of Simone St. James, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's just a little less atmosphere, a little less tension, and a little less character development than what I'm used to from her. It's still a great book, don't get me wrong, but I'm giving it 4 stars just because I felt like it's not the same as her other books. You know, it's still great, just different. If you do read Simone St. James and you haven't read this one, just go into this book knowing it's just a little bit different than her other stuff. If you've never read Simone St. James, I highly recommend Cold Case Files. My favorite one is The Sundown Motel. I really love that book. And Broken Girls. I think all 3 of those were her best books. This one's up there too. It's great. It's just a little bit different. What I didn't like about this is I felt like there was just a little bit less character development. I didn't really care about the couple. Oh, and this book is set in the 90s as well. And the main male character, he was in Desert Storm, so he's dealing with PTSD. And I felt like the author just kind of grazed over that, and I felt like that could have been developed more because I felt like that was very interesting, and I felt like it could have added more to this book as well. But overall, the characters, I just felt like it really wasn't developed as much as her other books are. But again, it's still great. It's still a 4-star read, but I still recommend anyone who wants to read this to read it. All right, so that is all of my 4-star reads. There were quite a few. Now let's jump to my 5-star reads. So for this rating, I only have 2 books that I gave 5 stars to. The first one is a reread for me, and it's Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. And I read this, I think when it came out, and I loved it. I wanted to reread it for a future video that I'm working on, and also because I couldn't remember what the plot twist was, and I wanted to just see if it was just as good as I remember, and it is. It's so good. So this book is about Maggie, who 25 years ago, her and her parents moved into a home called Bainbury Hall. So they spent a total of 3 weeks in this home before leaving in the middle of the night due to the ghostly encounters they had at that home. Well, her father ends up writing this bestseller book about their experience there, and it's kind of reminiscent to the Amityville Horror or the House on Haunted Hill. It becomes a hit. So her father ends up passing away and leaves this house that they used to live in to her. She is now a restorer of homes and kind of a house flipper. So she goes back to the home to get it prepared to sell and to find out if everything her dad wrote about is really true. This book was very spooky. It was very descriptive. Riley Sager and Simone St. James are very similar in the way they write because they write very descriptive, atmospheric books that really puts you in the scene and makes you feel and see and hear and smell everything the characters are experiencing, and I love that about those authors. This is fast-paced and quick. It was scary. It definitely reminded me of the show on Netflix called The Haunting of Hill House. It was just wonderful. It had a great plot twist and really great foreshadowing. I highly recommend this. This is one of my favorite Riley Sager books, and I highly recommend you read this if you haven't already. Okay, the last book I want to talk about, I loved. This is my favorite book this year so far. I just love this book so much, and it is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. A lot of YouTubers have been talking about this book. It's been all over BookTube, Book Talk, Bookstagram. Everyone's been hyping this book up, and I am here to tell you it has lived up to the hype. This one gets 6 stars for me. If you are looking for just an emotional love story, this is it. I think I cried halfway through the book and didn't stop. And I'm talking full on ugly cry, not all sweet. I mean, just, this book just got me in the core. I loved it. But here you are following a publishing publicist by the name of Clementine, who is grieving the death of her eccentric aunt. And her aunt has actually left Clementine her New York City apartment. And the kicker is the apartment is somewhat magical. So this book is a magical realism book. But in the apartment, at any given notice, when Clementine opens the door, she could either be in the present time or 7 years in the past, and it's always 7 years. But when she heads 7 years in the past, she meets wannabe chef, and I don't know if it's Ewan or Iwan. I've been calling him, when I was reading it, I was calling him Ewan, but he has sublet the apartment from her aunt. Through the course of this book, Clementine is being tossed from the present to the past, where she bonds with Ewan over just good food that he's cooking for her and just really great conversation. Just, they are connecting on so many levels. And along the way of this book, she is just rediscovering who she truly is. And that is what I really enjoyed about this book. Yes, I love this love story, but I love that Clementine is not only discovering love, but she's discovering herself after the death of her aunt. As I mentioned, this is quite the tearjerker, so be prepared. I didn't mind it at all. I love emotional reads if it's a good story. But this was just, it was just a raw and emotional read. I loved Clementine and Ewan's love story. They just kept trying to be together, and just the timing was never right. It was just so good. I couldn't put it down. But if you don't like time warp books or magical realism, don't let this deter you. It's not poorly done. It's not too in your face. It's so good. I personally love time warp books. I don't mind them if they're done right. And just this one is just the best one that I've read, and I want to read it again. It was so good. All right, guys, those are the 19 books. I hope this video isn't too long. I have a feeling it's going to be. But if you're still with me, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you read any of these books, please let me know which ones you read, and also let me know what was your favorite book for the month of March. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.